Hey guys, welcome back. For those who are here for the first time, I'm Akanksha Jain, your clinical psychology educator, and this video is brought to you by Psychologic. Today we will be starting module 2, which is Psychopathology 1, Classification Systems and Major Disorders. Anyone who has not completed module 1 first, I suggest you complete it because you should have a clear understanding and basic clarity of what we are studying. Now, I also hope that you attended the mock test and know that what you have learned and what you haven't remember, that's okay. Go and revise that. Okay. Now, since module 2 is huge, we will be dividing this module into different parts, into different videos. So, we will see what we'll cover today. But before that, we'll have a quick revision of what we studied in module 1. So, it will be good for you to remember those things. So, quickly, what we covered in module 1, first of all, was what is clinical psychology. So, there were three important terms, three pillars: science, theory, and practice. Then we moved on to scopes of clinical psychology, where we learned that assessment is a major work done by clinical psychologists and it is very unique to clinical psychology. Then we moved on to history. So before clinical psychology, we studied about Hippocrates, Pinel gave moral treatment. Then we moved on to difference between remembering that Wundt and Whitmer are different. Wundt gave experimental psychology, gave us a first experimental lab, while Whitmer came up with clinical psychology. He was the first one to treat patients using psychology, and he opened the first clinic. He gave the term clinical psychology. Then we moved on to World War One, Army Alpha test, Army Beta test, and development of different kinds of, even the development of the field due to World War. We learned about shell shock, right? Then we moved on to how psychologists should be trained. We studied two models, Boulder model and Whale model. Boulder model was scientist practitioner model, equal focus on both. While Whale model came up later, it focused more on the practitioner part, on clinical practice, and less on the research part, known as practitioner scholar model. Okay, then we learned about RCI and how it is important to be a licensed clinical psychologist. You should have an active CRR number, right? That is how you can practice legally in India. Then we also discussed different mental health professional roles, counseling psychologists, clinical psychologists, and psychiatrists, difference between them, then how they work as a multidisciplinary team. And always remember, clinical psychologists do not prescribe. Who prescribes? Psychiatrists. Okay, both can diagnose. Clinical psychologists can diagnose, psychiatrists can diagnose. Clinical psychologists' unique part is assessment. Okay, then what is clinical assessment? We discussed the goals, the principles, the process. We also understood that clinical assessment is way more broader than testing. Right? Clinical psychological testing is a part of clinical assessment. Clinical assessment has way more things. Okay. Then we also discuss clinical interview, how it is very structured. It is a purposeful conversation between the client and the psychologist, right? There were three types: structured interview, semi-structured interview, and unstructured interview. Then we discussed mental status examination. What is mental status examination? It's a snapshot. Snapshot of what? Current psychological state. Just current, not past, not future, only the present. Okay. It has 8 domains: appearance, behavior, speech, mood and affect, thought, perception, cognition, insight, and judgment. Then we also discussed in detail the confusion busters. We can get confused between mood and affect. Mood is what the client feels. Affect is what we observe. Okay, mood subjective, affect objective. Okay, we also discussed the difference between thought form and thought content. What is thought form? How the thought is expressed, that's thought form. What is thought content? What the thought is, that is thought content. Then we moved on to psychological testing. What is psychological testing? It's scientific, it's a specific measure, right? We discussed under that intelligence tests and personality tests and disorder scales. We also mentioned that we'll discuss the disorder scales specifically, then we'll do the disorders, right? Then we moved on to case formulation. In case formulation, we studied the 4 P's. What were the 4 P's? Predisposing factors. What makes you vulnerable? Then we had precipitating factors. What are the triggers? Then we have perpetuating factor. What maintains it? Then we had protective factors. What helps you in the recovery? What supports you? Then we also studied biopsychosocial model, that how biological causes, social causes, and psychological factors come together, and that causes some kind of disorder, and it's not always a single cause, right? So these were the things that we covered in the module 1. Now let's see what we'll cover today. So today we will be covering from module 2. First is the classification system, like DSM, ICD, the differences, the changes over the time, the evolution, things like that. Then we have neurodevelopmental disorder, autism spectrum disorder, intellectual disability disorder, specific learning disorders, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Then we have schizophrenia spectrum disorders. We have brief psychotic schizophrenia, schizophreniform, delusion disorder, schizoaffective disorder. So we look into these in full detail. So let's start. Now, before we go into detail of DSM and ICD, why do we need the classification system in the first place, right? Okay, let's imagine there are two psychologists. Okay, even before imagine psychologists, let's imagine me, okay? Now, in front of you, I need four people, okay? One person calls me Sita, the other person calls me Geeta, the third person calls me Aparna, and the fourth person calls me Vandana. Okay. How would you know how to address me? And how would, if you have to go and talk to your friend about me, how would you address me? How would they know who are you talking about? Everyone is addressing me with different names. Do you get the problem? Similarly, if two psychologists have the same client, and when they see the client for the same condition, one calls it manic depression, the other person calls it the bipolar, and the third person calls it something totally different. Okay, won't it be confusing for the client, for the professional itself himself, for even researchers, for even treatments, right? So that is why we need a proper system, a systemized standard system to classify these disorders, to have a common language common language among everyone in the world, to understand these disorders among every mental health professional across the world. Why? To maintain the accuracy, to maintain the consistency of diagnosis, of treatment, right? To facilitate proper communication. So that is why we need a classification system. Okay. Now, tell me, does classification system replaces clinical judgment? No. Classification system never replaces a clinical judgment, it only aids it. It's for their help and not to replace it. Okay. So what classification systems are actually used in clinical psychology? There are two. The first one is DSM. Okay, what is the full form of DSM? Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder. Remember the full forms. Okay, it's often asked. Who gave this? American Psychological Association, APA. Okay, widely used in US. So remember the full form, remember who gave it. Okay. The second classification system used is ICD. ICD is International Classification of Diseases. International Classification of Diseases. Okay, by WHO. By WHO. So, how are they different, right? So, let's understand that. Okay, so Diagnostics and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders by APA, DSM. Okay, it's a detailed diagnostic criteria book. It is used for clinical practice, teaching, research, etc. It is every disorder in its objective details with its diagnostic criteria in proper detail. While ICD has all the disorders and all the health conditions. Okay, DSM is only for mental disorders. It specifically mentions it in the name, while ICD is for all diseases, all disorders, all the health conditions. There is one chapter that is particularly dedicated to mental, behavioral, neurodevelopmental disorders. So it is internationally used, and this is one of the major and the basic any public health reporting uses this as their criteria. Okay. So what do we use in India? DSM, ICD? The answer is both. How both? For any clinical setting, for any kind of clinical judgment, for any diagnosis, what do we use? ICD. That's what we use. That is our main one. But don't we use DSM? Yes, we do use DSM for academic purposes, in academic settings, to understand, to learn. That is where we use DSM. So let's understand major differences between DSM and ICD, because that is the most favorite topic of any exam in psychology. So let's see that in detail. So first is who publishes them. So DSM is published by American Psychiatric Association, APA, and ICD is published by World Health Organization, WHO. Then what is their scope? DSM exclusive focus on mental disorders. Exclusive focus on mental disorders, while ICD covers all diseases and health condition. All. Okay. Then what is the diagnostic criteria? So DSM has a very extremely detailed diagnostic criteria, while ICD-11 or ICD in general has major focus on classifying the disorders and coding them. Classifying and coding. Okay. Now, what is their use? Where are they used? So, DSM is more used in clinical practice, in teaching, in research. Why ICD is more used for coding, for mental health records, for uh, public records, and things like that. Okay. Now, what is very important for you to remember is the full forms, who give what, and their functions. Now, let's see how these books, the manuals evolved over time. Okay. The current manual of DSM is the DSM-5 TR, the most current. And for ICD is ICD-11. Okay. But how did they evolve? You don't need to remember all these dates by line. Just have an understanding of it. So, first of all, DSM-1, right? 1952 DSM-1, right? It came with a very psychoanalytic explanation of disorders. Then we moved forward and forward, and in DSM 3, there was a major shift. It shifted and introduced operational criterions, which made it more consistent and more reliable. Okay, and then finally came DSM-4 in 1994, which was still referred in some places. Okay. And then came finally DSM 510 in 2013. Important date, remember this. And then came in 2022 was DSM 5 TR. What is TR? Text revision. What is TR? Text revision. Remember, it's not DSM 6. It's not a new manual altogether. It's just a text revision. What is a text revision? It basically revised prevalence rates, codings, and things like that. Okay. So very minor changes. Okay. It's not a new version. Okay. Now let's look into ICD. Now ICD has a way longer history than DSM. Okay. But what we need to focus on is in ICD 6. That was the first time mental disorders were included. Okay. In ICD 6. Okay. And then when ICD 11 came in 2019, remember, it was only released in 2019. It came effective in 2022. We're still transitioning. In India, we're still transitioning from 10 to 11. Okay. So, that is when it was adopted officially by WHO. It was officially adopted by WHO. Okay. So, now there's some things that you need to know is DSM-5 removal, Asperger's syndrome. So we'll discuss some important major changes of DSM-5 and DSM-5 TR. Okay. The first is removal of multi-axial system. So DSM-4 used to follow a 5-axis system. It divided the disorders into 5 axes. One was for clinical disorders, one was for personality disorders, one was for medical conditions, one was for psychosocial factors, and the other was for overall function. Now, DSM-5 says that no, we need a one integrated system, one integrated diagnosis rather than dividing it into parts. Okay. Then second is autism spectrum disorder. So first, there were different disorders like autism, Asperger's disorder, PD-NOS, childhood disintegrative disorder as different disorders. Now there's a spectrum. What do we mean by the term spectrum? So it varies on a continuum on the basis of severity, right? So that is a spectrum, and based on that spectrum, these all comes under that. So third is dimensional assessment. Dimension is basically, it's not categories. We'll also see this after this slide. It's not only divided into categories, but also on basis of severity, specifier, cross-cutting system. What is a cross-cutting symptom measure? Basically, one symptom is not specific to one disorder, right? Symptoms occur across disorders. Suppose if I say, I'm not able to sleep properly, that symptom is specific to one disorder? It is not. It could be related to anxiety, it could be related to depression, it could be related to PTSD, it could be related to bipolar, number of disorders. So that is what a cross-cutting symptom is. Okay. Then, okay, remember again, DSM-5 TR is not DSM-6. It's not a new version, it's just a text revision. Then we have a new disorder, a new diagnosis added, which is called prolonged grief disorder, in which any, grief more than 12 months is given a diagnosis of prolonged grief disorder in adults, and in children it's more than 6 months. Okay. Remember, DSM-5 only changed the structure. This only refined content. Okay. Okay. Now, very short, very fast. What is the difference between categorical dimension classification and dimensional classification? Categorical, imagine this as, okay, I am talking about fan. Okay. So fan has on and off switch. So either the fan is on, either the fan is off. Right? That's category. If I switch on the fan, it's on. If I switch the button off, it's off. That's category. But there's also a regulator in the fan, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's dimension. So dimension is more on a continuum. Okay, how severe it is, how how variable it is. So things like that is captured now, right? So now still it's the DSM is still categorical, but it has added dimensional aspect to it, making it more giving it a better understanding of the disorders itself. Okay, now let's move on to neurodevelopmental disorders. Okay, first and foremost thing that you need to know about neurodevelopmental disorders is they develop during developmental period. Its onset is during developmental period. Okay, and it affects areas like intellectual functioning, adaptive functioning, communication, language, motor skills, things like that. Okay, so there are 7 broad categories: intellectual disability disorder, communication disorder, challenges in understanding the language, speaking the language, speech, things like that. Motor disorder, again, movement patterns, things like that. Okay, then we have autism spectrum disorder. We'll discuss IDD, ASD, ADHD, and SLD in detail. Okay, so we have also ADHD, SLD, and other neurodevelopmental disorders, anything that does not reach the criteria specifically, but it still has some kind of symptom. Okay, so let's first begin with IDD, intellectual disability disorder. Obviously, since we are discussing it on neurodevelopmental disorder, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. Okay, we'll start this by understanding two main things. There should be deficit in two major places, where first is intellectual deficit. Deficit in intellectual functioning. What is intellectual functioning? Planning, reasoning, any kind of logic, any kind of abstract thinking, problem solving, taking, making judgments, things like that. Everything comes under intellectual functioning. So basically, what question that you're asking is, can this individual think properly, think adequately? Okay, but is it enough? No. There should be deficit in adaptive functioning as well. Now, what is adaptive function? The ability to apply these things in real life, in your daily life, is adaptive functioning. Okay, so in home settings, in school settings, in any kind of social settings. So the question that you ask here is, can this individual manage their life themselves? That is the question that you're asking. So if there is a 10-year-old kid, okay, who has difficulty in understanding whatever is being taught in the class, okay, whenever you give them any kind of instructions, they are not able to grasp it properly. They're always struggling in school, okay. And when you even look at their home activities, there is no kind of personal hygiene that they are able to maintain, okay. So they're not able to eat properly, things like that. So this is not just intellectual disability that is intellectual functioning deficit that is happening. There's also adaptive deficit, in their personal life, right? So that is where we'll think of IDD, not just intellectual functional deficit, but also adaptive functional deficit. But what is the third criteria that has been fulfilled here to call it IDD? The third criteria that has been fulfilled here is onset during developmental period. Usually, developmental period is childhood and to adolescence. Okay, so there are 3 criteria, and all the 3 criteria should be fulfilled. We look into this in a little more detail. It's the proper criteria. So the first criteria talks about intellectual functioning. How do we know the intellectual functioning has deficits or not? By looking, oh, I think he has some kind of deficit. No, right? We need proper clinical assessments and proper standardized intelligence testing. Okay, and that is how we confirm this. Then the criterion B talks about putting way more emphasis on daily functioning is affected. What kind of daily functioning? And not just at one place. Like, only he's not able to talk properly, but he does rest of the things perfectly. No. There should be in more than one areas like communication, social participation, independent living, things like that. And also across multiple settings. It shouldn't be like at home only he is doing like that, but at school he performs well. Or with friends he performs well. No. It should be at more than one places, home, school, work, community, across multiple environments. So, and the third criteria is again, it should be during developmental period. Again, all three criteria has to be fulfilled. Okay. So now comes now that we have understood the dimensional aspect comes dimension sorry we understood the categorical aspect. Now comes the dimensional aspect. We discuss whether the child has IDD or not. Okay, now how severe it is and how do we decide that? Earlier it was decided on the basis of IQ scores. Okay, um, so this is the historical reference which you can see mild, moderate, severe, profound based on the IQ scores in the intelligence testing. But now, according to DSM-5 and DSM-5-TR, it is based on adaptive functioning. It is based on adaptive functioning. Okay. So based on adaptive functioning, that is how much support is needed. There are 4 levels: mild, moderate, severe, and profound. Okay. So mild, if we talk about mild intellectual disability, so what do we expect? We expect that this child could complete his or her school with proper support. He can hold a job and comparatively live independently in the near future. But when we come to moderate, we are saying that he will need a regular supervision, but at the same time, he will be able to learn basic academic skills, basic vocational skills. When we move to severe ID, we're seeing that this person needs extensive support for even daily activities. And then we move on to profound. These people are totally dependent on someone else for almost every aspect, every little aspect of their life. Now that we have understood the category, the dimension, what actually causes intellectual disability? That is where comes etiology. Okay. Now, intellectual disability can occur at different stages during the developmental period. So, there are 3 stages that we will discuss: prenatal, perinatal, and postnatal. What do we mean by prenatal? Prenatal is before birth. Prenatal means before birth. So, before birth, what are the reasons that a child could develop ID? Down syndrome is one of the genetic reasons. What is Down syndrome? It's trisomy of 21 gene. Then we have some genetic disorders like Fragile X syndrome. Okay, and then it is actually one of the most inherited one. Then we have maternal infections. Okay, and then we also have alcohol or drug exposure like FASD. This is fetal alcohol syndrome. Or fetal alcohol syndrome. So things like that could affect it even before birth. Then we have perinatal, that is during birth. Now, what could be the reasons of ID during birth? First is birth asphyxia. What do we mean there? Lack of oxygen to the child during the birth process. Then what is prematurity? If the child is born before 37 weeks. Before 37 weeks. And then what do we mean by birth trauma? So a lot of times during the delivery, there is some kind of brain injury that happens, which is known as birth trauma. Okay, we have discussed prenatal, perinatal, now postnatal, that is after birth. So what could happen after birth? Any kind of head injury, that is traumatic brain injury. Traumatic brain injury. Then CNS infections like meningitis, encephalitis. These causes inflammation in the brain. Then we have severe malnutrition, which could affect the brain growth. And environmental toxins like lead poisoning. What could it lead to? It could lead to deficits in cognitive functioning. And even cognitive development. Okay. So while we can see that most of these causes have a biological basis, there are environmental factors that contribute. Like in the case of severe malnutrition, it could be due to a low socioeconomic status, right? So in the environmental factors can play a role. It could be these reasons of perinatal birth trauma because they did not have access to a good hospital, a good doctor, right? Now let's move on to another disorder. But yes, before moving on to another disorder, remember the case that we discussed about the 10-year-old child who was needed assistance. So if I say that this child, after providing assistance, a little bit of good assistance, he was able to perform well in school, or at least okay in school, and comparatively, he learned slowly. He got better at at maintaining personal hygiene, at eating, and things like that. And when we also did this person's IQ test, we got the score of 64. What is the level of IDB? 64. And then with a little help, he was basically able to do good at academic skills and even live independently, right? So that's MID ID. Okay. Now let's move on to autism spectrum disorder. Now, remember DSM-4 thingy where we had like four parts and then it has merged into one spectrum known as autism spectrum disorder. Basically, they differ in symptoms and severity. Now, again, it is a neurodevelopmental disorder, right? It has two core features. The first core feature is there is difficulty in social communication and social interaction. What do we mean by difficulty in social interaction, social communication? What do you mean is this child, may avoid eye contact. Okay, when you call their name, they do not respond. Okay, they struggle making friends, and they're not able to interpret the body language, the facial expressions properly. That is what we call deficit in um, social communication, social interactions. Okay. Then the second core reason is restricted and repetitive pattern of behavior or interests or activities. Like, this child keeps on hand flapping, okay, and he'll always just play with one particular toy. Or if you try to even change one aspect of their daily routine, right, they'll get very agitated, okay. Or they find extreme interest in only just one topic, like they're obsessed with that topic. So things like that, restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior, interest, or activities. Now, so this was the first criteria, which is the social communication and social interaction. The second criteria was restricted repetitive patterns of behavior, interest, or activity. The third is, again, it should be present in early developmental period. Now, when we say it should be present in early developmental period, it's hard to recognize it earlier, because very early, because obviously there are not enough social demands and environmental demands. But as the demands increase, as the social demands increase, you'll be able to notice these things more clearly. Okay. And the fourth symptom is that it should be clinical, it should be significant enough that it is causing impairment in social occupation or other important function. Basically, it causes impairment in your daily life functioning. It shouldn't be that, okay, I face this problem, but I'm able to function properly. No, it should be serious enough that it is causing some kind of impairment. Okay, so let's see some key features. So we discussed social communication difficulties, restricted and repetitive behavior patterns. Now we have sensory sensitivities. Sensory sensitivities basically mean, this child would be very sensitive towards loud noises, bright lights, or certain kind of textures, or sometimes they barely respond to even pain. So these kinds of sensory sensitivities, it could be hyper or it could be hyper. Okay. And then we're seeing variable presentation. What do we understand by that? So autism, there's a reason that we have put it into a spectrum, is because it is highly variable from individual to individual. Every individual shows up with different symptoms, with different kind of uh, feature. Okay. So that is why it varies very much, and hence it is on a spectrum. Okay. And it is often co-occurs with other symptoms like ID, language impairment, ADHD, anxiety disorders, sleep problems, and sensory processing issues. Okay. Now, let's say there was a 4-year-old boy who does not meet your eye at all, okay, and does not like playing with other children at all, and always keeps on repeating some kind of word. And whenever you try to, suppose change, let's wake up a little early today, or let's wake up a little late today, they get agitated by that. They get very irritated by it. They are not able to process it properly. Even, you'll see that they are obsessed. So let's say this child is obsessed. Whenever you'll talk about playing with them, they'll just take out this one toy car and always play with its wheels. So these symptoms, could be related to and could be diagnosed as autism spectrum disorder. Okay. Now let's move on to the next disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. As the name should suggest, attention deficit, inattention, hyperactivity, and it also has impulsivity. Impulsivity. These are the three key features. Key features. Okay. So, what one main term that you need to know in ADHD is that people mostly think when we are talking about ADHD is the child is very naughty, or the child is very inobedient, or the child just cannot sit still. These are all misconceptions. ADHD is not just about, being naughty or being hyperactive. It's actually a disorder of self regulation. It's a disorder of self regulation. The child is not able to self regulate himself. Okay, that is what is causing attention issues, impulse control issues. So, the four important criteria are: first is persisting pattern of inattention or hyperactivity, impulsivity. Okay, now we look into what hyperactivity, inattention, impulsivity means. Second is it should be before the age of 12 years. We have a proper age. Till now, we were just saying developmental years. Now we have a proper age before 12 years. Third is it should be in more than two settings. It shouldn't be like school mein bas dhyan nahi deta hai, and when he comes home he does everything properly, or uh, only at home he does not do these things. In school with friends he's great. So that shouldn't be. It should be in two or more settings. Okay, and it should cause significant impairment, as we discussed in ASD. It shouldn't be that thoda problem ho raha hai, but it's fine. No, it should cause some kind of impairment, and it should not be explained by any kind of other mental health disorder or any other kind of disorder. Okay. So now inattention. What do we mean by inattention here? Inattention is when a child cannot focus at all. He's always distracted. Keeps losing things. Keeps forgetting to do things. Always is very disorganized. Okay. So things like that shows inattention. Hyperactivity, always fidgeting, always playing with something. Suppose I'm always doing this, right? And then when in class, it just cannot sit at one place. It's always moving around. Okay. And he just run and climb at inappropriate places, and things like that. Always on the move. Okay. Impulsivity is basically, when suppose even before the question completes, they tend to blurt out answers. Okay, they cannot wait for their turn, their time. They have this tendency, they just cannot control. They'll interrupt conversations, they'll interrupt games. Okay, so they just cannot wait. So the problem is self regulation. So if there is a kid, okay, and the teacher complains to the mom that this child never sits still at class. He's always disturbing others, always interrupting the class, never does his homework on time, always forgets things, sometimes do not bring books. And then the parents also observe, yeah, he does the same thing at home as well. He's never sitting at one place, right? He we have to tell this child all the time, do this, do this, do this, and he just cannot sit and just do it. So there is the same pattern at home, same pattern at school, right? They're not able to self-regulate themselves. So that is what ADHD is. Now let's move on to the next disorder, which is specific learning disorder. Now again, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. um let's say there is this child, there are two children in school, both equally intelligent. There is no difference in their intelligence, and I asked them both to read a chapter. Okay, now one reads it fluently. Okay, perfect pronunciations, comprehension, fluency, everything. The other child is not able to read it properly. He's not able to comprehend it, not able to speak it properly. He's not fluent at it. He's making reading mistakes and things like that. Why is this happening? Is that child dumber? No, we already established that they have the same intelligence level. So what we need to know about specific learning disorder is it's not the problem with the intelligence. They are normal. They have normal intelligence, even above average intelligence. The problem is not with intelligence, it's with the academic skills that is required with it. Okay, skills that they face problem in could be writing, could be reading, could be mathematics, calculation, things like that. That is where they are facing problem. Okay, so what is the problem is they have a disorder. And what are the criteria? It should be more than 6 months. First of all, should be more than 6 months. Okay. And when we say that they're not able to do things, now you can't be like, oh, my child cannot solve algebra and he's in 3. You can't expect a class 3 student to solve algebra until that is of their age, and they're not able to perform that. So they are not able to perform that is expected out of their age. So academic underachievement. Then difficulty begins during school age years. So obviously, when the situation would demand, only then you can learn that there is some kind of deficit that is happening, right? So you'll observe it more and more when the academic pressure, when the academic demands increase. Then the fourth is it should not be explained by IDD. Obviously, a child diagnosed with intellectual disability disorder will face problems with things like that, right? Or it shouldn't be explained by, oh, the child is not able to even see properly. That is why they're not able to comprehend, or listen properly. That is why they're not able to comprehend. So these reasons have to be ruled out. Okay. And it should not be due to lack of instruction, language barriers. It shouldn't be like, this child cannot speak English, they have SLD. No, maybe that child did not have access to English education, right? So you need to see the language barriers, the cultural barriers there are, and rule those out as well. Okay. So there are 3 types of SLD. The first is called dyslexia. Dyslexia is a reading disorder. What happens in this is the example that I was giving was of dyslexia. They're not able to read accurately and fluently or understand, comprehend it properly. That is where the problem lies. Okay. The rest things would be fine, but they're not able to read. How can we? Maybe you can give them audios of it, right? That would be easier for them to comprehend. Okay. There are different kind of fonts that help to read better as well. Okay. Then we have dysgraphia. That is a writing disorder. What happens in this is they have a very poor handwriting. Like, I know what I'm saying, but this is what I write. So they won't be able to comprehend it, right? So this is the problem. If I'm writing, anything, there are spelling mistakes. So I write spelling like this. A lot of spelling mistakes they make. Okay. They cannot even organize their writing. So these are the kind of things they face problem with. Now, dyscalculia, that is where it's a mathematics disorder. They face problems with numbers, calculations, reasonings, and things like that. So, this is where we have to remember again, it's not a disorder of intelligence, but it is of academic skills. Okay. Now, there are some other neurodevelopmental disorders as well. You don't need to know them in this much detail, but obviously you should be familiar with them in case it ever appears in the examination. So just a quick reference. Communication disorders, language disorder, there are difficulties in acquiring the language itself. Speech sound disorder, they cannot produce sounds correctly. Childhood onset fluency disorder, known as stuttering, you stutter a lot. Social pragmatic communication disorder, they have problem in using verbal and non-verbal cues in social situations. Okay, this is different than ASD. This is not a repetitive or a restricted behavior. This differentiates it from ASD. Okay, then you have motor disorders, which is developmental coordination disorder. They're not able to coordinate. Their motor movements are not coordinated in daily activities. Then you have stereotypic movement disorder. A repetitive motion would be there, like I'm doing this. Repetitive motion. And tic disorder, we have Tourette syndrome, persistent motor or vocal tic disorder, provisional tic disorder. There are 3 types of tic disorders as well. Just to know their names, have an idea that they come under neurodevelopmental disorder, they come under motor disorders, communication disorders, things like that. That is enough. Okay. Now let's move on to what common assessments and what common treatments can be used with these neurodevelopmental disorders. So for IDD, the first one is VABS, Vinland Adaptive Behavioral Scale, and the second one is ABAS-3, Adaptive Behavioral Assessment Scale. These are used for adaptive function, measuring adaptive functioning. Then we have BASE, MISIC, and BKT, used for measuring intellectual functioning. These 2 are from India. We already discussed this in the module 1. We discussed all these 3. Okay, great. Now, looking into the treatment. So, treatment, we have early intervention. So, these things are obviously a lifelong disorder, right? But they could be really helped and can have a better quality of life if they get early interventions and proper education and proper therapy, especially with family support, which could act as a protective factor. So, these things are really important for the treatment. Okay, moving on to autism spectrum disorder. So, this ADOS-2 is a gold standard autism diagnostic observation schedule. Then we have ADIR, Autism Diagnostic Interview Revised, and CARS-2, also very important. Now, one more that you need to know is ISA, Indian Scale for Assessment of Autism. This has been given by NIPID, Dehradun. It was earlier known as NIMH, National Institute of Mentally Handicapped. They have given the scale, and this is used in India for disability certification. This scale. So you need to have some clinical psychologists conduct this for you to get a proper disability certification for autism. Okay. Now for treatment, the gold standard is applied behavioral analysis. We have speech therapy, occupational therapy, and parent mediated intervention. Again, clinical psychology is a multidisciplinary approach, so you need occupational therapists, speech therapists to also help you out. Then we have ADHD. The most important, the most asked question for it is Horner's rating scale. And we also have Wonderbit ADHD scale, SNAP-4. And the treatment again is behavioral therapy, parent training, and you have to remember these two, especially this one. Methylphenidate is a first-line stimulant, and atomoxetine, non-stimulant. Very important, remember this. Okay. Now, again, remember it's a lifelong condition, but timely interventions and good care could improve the quality of life to a great extent. Now, let's move on to another disorder, which is schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorder. So let's look at the bigger picture first, right? To remember this, the easiest way is through duration. Okay, the more increased time for psychosis is, the more timeline the disorder changes, the diagnosis changes. Okay, what is psychosis first, right? We need to know what psychosis is to understand further schizophrenia spectrum, right? So psychosis is not a disorder in itself, right? It's a clinical syndrome, right? It's an aspect, okay, where you lose contact with the reality itself. You cannot differentiate between what is real and what is not. That is what happens when you have delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, disorganized thought, disorganized behavior. That is what happens here. So this is what psychosis is. Suppose if a person thinks that there is a chip that government has inserted inside their brain to track them, to track what they are thinking about, so that thought would be called a psychotic thought. Okay. Not everyone with psychosis has schizophrenia, because schizophrenia again exists in a spectrum. Okay, as we said that autism exists in a spectrum. So now that we understand what psychosis is, we'll move on to the most important disorder, which is schizophrenia. Before that, so obviously there are 6 types of disorders in schizophrenia spectrum. Okay, we will see this in the timeline. So you can see here the timelines are specified. Okay, this schizotypal personality disorder is a personality disorder. Okay, it's not explained under schizophrenia spectrum, although it comes under it. That is why it's mentioned here. Okay, we will discuss this with the personality disorders. Okay, and then schizoaffective and delusional disorder. Okay, these two have slightly different diagnosis than the others in the spectrum. We'll also see this. Okay, let's move on to schizophrenia. Okay, when I talk about schizophrenia, it's a chronic psychotic disorder. Okay, it's long lasting and it affects your thinking, your reality, your behavior, your thought, your function, your emotions, everything. Okay, now one of the major misconceptions about schizophrenia is that schizophrenia is split personality, which we earlier used to call multiple personality disorder. Now it is known as dissociative identity disorder. It does not come under schizophrenia. Schizo means not split personality, it means split mind. Okay, it means split mind, which is disruption in your thinking, in your perception, not your personality. You do not have 2 different personalities. It's just this personality's thinking is very disrupted. Your perception is distorted. Okay, that's what schizo means. Let's look into the criteria. So the criteria says that out of these 5, there should be at least 2 or more present, and out of these 3, at least 1 should be present. Okay. Now let's look into these symptoms one by one. What is a delusion? Suppose I tell you that, my neighbors spy at me through my television. What do you think this is? Do you think it's true? Huh? So this thought is a false belief and it's a fixed belief. So it's a um okay. Delusion is a false fixed belief. Okay. Which obviously is not true, and you can even see the evidence of of its not being true, and despite that you still believe. That's what a delusion is. Now what is a hallucination? Now I say that, this person keeps on talking to me, and in front of you I'm talking to this person as well. Okay, okay, yeah, I'll do this, I'll do that. Okay, but you can't see that person. Okay, so who am I talking to? I am telling you that this person is talking to me. I can hear this person. Okay, so there is no external stimuli, but I'm still perceiving something. Okay, so perceiving something that is not even present, that when there is no external stimuli, that's what a hallucination is. Okay, hallucinations are 70 to 80% auditory, by the way. It could be other types, but 70 to 80% cases are auditory. Okay. So it is different from illusion, always remember. In illusion, there is an external stimuli. External stimuli is present, it is only misinterpreted. Right, like I go into a room where lights are not on, it's dark, and I see a rope lying around and it touches my feet, and I jump thinking it's a snake. Okay, I see it and I think it's a snake and I freak out. Okay, so there is an external stimuli, that is the rope, and I misinterpreted it as snake. That's an illusion. Hallucination, there is no external stimuli. Okay, and delusion is a belief. It's not any perception, it's a belief. Okay, then we have disorganized speech. Let's say this person, like, let's say I'm talking to you and I'm talking to you, I'm talking about schizophrenia right now, and then I instantly jump into what I had this morning, and then I instantly jump into how my mom is, and I instantly jump into um you know this place I went to is extremely beautiful. So I keep on jumping from one topic to another, and you cannot follow it. The thought is so disorganized that the person listening to it cannot even comprehend it, and it's very difficult for you to follow. That is what disorganized speech is. Okay. Now, moving on to grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior. Grossly disorganized behavior is any extremely unpredictable behavior, extremely inappropriate behavior. Okay, like right now I'm teaching to you, and would it be inappropriate of me to start dancing right now? No, it won't. So it's very disorganized kind of behavior, very unpredictable and very not appropriate in the situation. So that is what disorganized behavior is. And catatonic behavior is basically they hardly move or respond. Hardly move or respond. So just no functioning kind of behavior. And then we have negative symptoms. The negative symptoms is basically absence or very reduced um, normal functioning. Okay, we'll discuss this in detail in the next slide. Okay. So now that we know these criteria, what is the duration that this should be on? So the active phase of it should be for more than 1 month, at least 1 month or more than 1 month, right? And the total duration could be, should be, not could be, should be at least more than 6 months. So, what do you mean by active phase and what do you mean by total phase, which should have prodromal and it should have residual? Schizophrenia has three phases. The first phase is prodromal, the second is active, the third is residual. Okay. So, prodromal phase is basically before even the illness started to become obvious. Okay, it's like an early warning stage. You won't know. You'll think that something is off, but you actually don't know what is. Okay, there will be social withdrawal, loss of interest slowly, decreased motivation, a little bit of suspiciousness. Okay, why are you doing that though? Things like that. So that is the prodromal phase. Then we come to active phase. Active phase is basically classic psychosis. Okay, you'll have delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, disorganized behavior, and that should last for at least 1 month for the diagnosis of schizophrenia. Then we have the residual phase, which is after the active phase, which is when these positive symptoms, delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, disorganized behavior, they either decrease or they improve a lot basically, but the negative symptoms last. Okay. Now there are some key facts that you should know. The lifetime prevalence is 1%. It usually occurs during the adolescence or early adulthood. Males have it earlier normally than females. Then you should know that positive symptoms normally respond better to antipsychotics. Okay, than negative symptoms. Negative symptoms are very hard to treat, very difficult to treat. Now, one thing more that you should know is older diagnosis requires Schneider's first rank symptoms. They should need Schneider's first rank symptoms. Who is Schneider? Schneider is a German psychiatrist. German psychiatrist known as Kurt Schneider. He gave some symptoms, that were used to diagnose schizophrenia, but later on it was removed because these symptoms that he mentioned were not specific to schizophrenia. It could have occurred with other diagnoses as well, so it was later removed and no longer considered as a diagnostic criteria. We also don't have any types. So in the DSM-4, we used to have types of schizophrenia like paranoid, hebephenic, actonic, etc. We don't have that anymore. Okay. Now, quickly, what we're going to do is look into positive versus negative symptoms. So, positive symptoms is anything that is added to the normal experience. Added perception, added beliefs, added behavior, added thought, added speech. Anything. We already discussed all of these hallucinations, delusions, disorganized speech, catatonic or disorganized behavior. We also did discuss this auditory hallucination thing. Now, let's discuss negative symptoms. Again, reduction from the normal function. Like, what is reduction of the quality of speech in itself. How much you speak, the quality of it. It's called alogia. Remember these terms, often asked in exams. Okay, alogia is poverty of speech. Evolution is they don't have any motivation anymore to do anything. So that is evolution. Then we have anhedonia. They have lost pleasure in doing things that they used to love to do before. That's anhedonia. Affective flattening, also known as flat effect. Is any kind of the face is okay. Yeah, anarchy and sad. So this is what flat effect is. No bare emotional expression. Asociality, very withdrawn, no social interactions and all. Okay. And assessment tools, we'll do this further. Okay. Now, so as I said, the best way to remember what disorder is what is through duration. Okay. So just remember how long the psychotic symptoms lasted, and that will be your first clue to differentiate between the schizophrenia symptoms, schizophrenia spectrum. So first is the psychotic disorder. The duration is 1 day to 1 month. So anything that lasts from 1 day to 1 month is known as the psychotic disorder. Then we have schizophreniform disorder. It is should be more than 1 month but less than 6 months. Okay. So when you have symptoms like schizophrenia, but it is less than 6 months but more than 1 month, then we have schizophreniform. Then we have schizophrenia. If it is more than 6 months, total. Remember, active symptoms should be at least more than 1 month. Then we have schizoaffective disorder. Now this duration is done. The second question that we're going to ask is there only the symptoms of psychosis, of schizophrenia, or do we have any other symptoms as well? So schizoaffective disorder is basically schizophrenia symptoms plus mood disorders to symptoms, which we'll be doing in the next video, mood disorder symptoms. Okay. So it could be a major manic episode or major depressive episode together. And if we have the, diagnosis of that as well, it is known as schizoaffective disorder. And then we have delusional disorder. In this, basically, they do not have the other symptoms of schizophrenia, but they only have delusions, more than one delusions even. Okay, but we need to remember that those delusions are of non-bizarre kind. Now, what do you mean by non-bizarre kind? Let's look into this in detail. So, delusional disorders. Now, delusional disorder, first of all, what we need to know is, yes, they shouldn't meet any other ASM criteria of schizophrenia, but, and also they have comparatively relatively normal functioning as well. Now, delusional disorder is of 5 types. First is erotomanic. I'm saying you, this Bollywood celebrity keeps on sending me, secret love messages through their interviews. What do you think? Is it true? So believing that some kind of known personality is in love with you, that's what erotomanic delusion is. Then we have grandiose disorder. God has told me to do this. God has sent me to save the world. So believing that you have exceptional powers or exceptional knowledge, exceptional anything, that's grandiose delusion. Jealousy is, I keep on checking my partner's phone because I think he's cheating on me. Okay, so I keep on checking his phone. That is jealous delusion. Then we have persecutory, most common type. Persecutory is most common type. I'm being followed. Someone is conspiring against me. Someone wants to poison me. Someone wants to kill me. anything. That is what this is. And then we have somatic. Somatic is, I feel like some insect is crawling all the time, or I have some kind of disease. Despite that, whenever I get tests, all comes, uh, nothing comes on those. But I still believe that I have some kind of problem. I have a cut here. You can't, I have it. I can feel it. So, so what is the difference between bizarre delusions and non-bizarre delusions? Bizarre delusions basically means something that cannot really happen in this real life. Okay, aliens came and took my brain out and planted a chip inside it, and now they control whatever I'm doing. It's so bizarre that it cannot really happen in real life. So that is what, and that is what a bizarre delusion is, and it is normally seen in schizophrenia. It is not normally seen in delusional disorder. Now, non-bizarre is something that is really possible in real life. Like maybe that this person is really trying to kill you. Okay, so that is something that can happen in real life. It is seen in delusional disorder. Okay. Now, now that we know all types of disorders, okay, why does actually schizophrenia develop? We'll understand that through diathesis stress model. Okay. What is diathesis? सबसे पहले what is diathesis? Diathesis is any kind of underlying vulnerability or predisposition. Okay, any kind of underlying vulnerability or predisposition. Okay, and what is stress? Stress is any kind of environmental trigger. Trigger. Any kind of environmental trigger. Okay, so understand this as a loaded gun. So diathesis is a loaded gun. So I loaded the gun. That's diathesis. If I pull the trigger, that trigger, pulling the trigger is the stress. So when the threshold crosses, it fires, right? That firing is the disorder. So basically, what we are trying to say is there is some kind of factor that makes you vulnerable to this disorder. Now, this stress comes, it triggers this, and then it crosses your coping threshold, and that is when the disorder occurs. So, what could happen? Diathesis could be a genetic factor, it could be a dysregulation, it could be some kind of neurodevelopmental abnormality. What is the stress? It could be any kind of stressful life event, it could be use of drugs, it could be some kind of psychosocial adversity like, um, you know, you got bankrupt, something like that. What is high expressed emotion? High expressed emotion is you are in, suppose, a kind of family where you get high criticism all the time, okay, or they're very hostile towards you all the time, and or they over involve you in everything that is not your responsibility. It also increases the chance of relapse a lot. Okay, so what you need to know is, suppose there are two people, okay, both lost their job. One coped with it properly, okay, the other person had a genetic vulnerability to schizophrenia. Now this job loss acted as a stressor, and hence led to was the prodromal chaos, schizophrenia, then active, and then delay. Move on. How can you prove that it's diathesis and stress? It's genetic plus environmental. The monozygotic twins, right? They only have 48% of concordance rate. Okay, not 100%. Why? Because yes, genes play a huge role, 48%. But it's the environment that is triggering it that we need to remember. Okay. Now that we know all about how schizophrenia occurs, how do we clinically assess it and clinically manage this condition? First is PANS. It's the gold standard. This is positive and negative symptom scale. As the name suggests, it measures the positive and negative symptoms. Then we have BPRS, Brief Psychiatric Rating Scale. Measures the psychiatric symptoms severity. Severity. Then obviously, as we have discussed in module 1, we have clinical interviews, we have MSCs, that gives us a good idea of other things. Then in treatment, the first line of treatment is antipsychotics. First, we need to control the positive symptoms specifically. Remember, it's easier to control positive symptoms. It's very hard for it to control negative symptoms. First generation antipsychotics are usually for positive symptoms. Second generation antipsychotics is mostly for positive and negative symptoms. Okay. Then we have obviously CBT to manage those stress or delusions and uh, increasing the insight. Then family education, psychoeducation. Family gets affected a lot in this kinds of disorders. So it is important that family is educated in how to manage themselves and the person themselves. Then psychosocial rehabilitation, training them with social skills, vocational skills to improve the quality of their life. Now we are done with today's lecture. We have discussed the classification system, neurodevelopmental disorders, schizophrenia. Let's test, what you have understood today. Pause after listening to the question, answer it yourself, see if you answered it correctly. Good if you answered it correctly. It's okay if you did not. Go and revise it. Okay? So, question number one: which of the following correctly identifies who publishes DSM 5 TR and which classification system is the official WHO standard? Option A, DSM 5 TR WHO, ICD 11 APA. Option B, DSM 5 APA, ICD 11 WHO. C, both DSM and ICD are published by WHO, and fourth, both are published by APA. Pause, answer. So the answer is B. DSM is by APA and ICD is by WHO. Okay, next question. A patient presents with a 4-month history of auditory hallucinations and disorganized speech. She meets DSM 5 TR criterion A for schizophrenia. What is the most accurate diagnosis at this point? A, schizophrenia. B, psychotic disorder. C, schizophreniform disorder. D, delusional disorder. The answer would be C, schizophreniform disorder, right? Because it's a 4 month. 1 to 6 months is for this. Less than one would have been breach psychotic, and more than 6 would have been schizophrenia. Delusion does not only has delusions and not hallucinations and disorganized speech. They do not meet the criterion A. Question number 3. A child is assessed with a WIS 5 full scale IQ of 62. In DSM 5 TR, what additional evidence is required before a diagnosis of intellectual disability can be made? A, a second IQ test confirming the score. B, evidence of genetic cause. C, deficits in adaptive functioning across conceptual, social, and practical domains. D, onset of symptoms after age 5. So the answer would be yes, C. Answer would be C. We need to know the adaptive functioning deficit deficit across different domains, right? It is a child, so they are in the developmental stage. Okay, it has to be the first thing that have to be assessed. Okay, especially for the severity part. Okay. Fourth, a person with schizophrenia was found to repeat whatever words the psychiatric social worker was speaking. This behavior can be labeled as A, echopraxia, B, neologism, C, word salad, and D, echolalia. This is a little tough one. We did not discuss this in detail, so still try to answer it. The answer would be D, echolalia. Now, echolalia is repeating the words. Lalia, echo means copy. Lalia is repeating words. Okay, so repeating words. Echo, copy, praxia is for movement. So repeating movements, copying movements of someone else. Okay, that is that. Neologism is neo. So making up new words, Word salad is you're not able to even understand. It's a mix of all the words. So that is what is word salad. Now, last question. A patient in a mental hospital tried to stitch her lips together while asleep to avoid someone poisoning her. What is the most probable diagnosis? A, bipolar disorder. D, hebephrenic schizophrenia. C, delusional disorder. D, borderline personality disorder. The answer would be C, delusional disorder. Okay. Why? Bipolar? Are we talking about a mood? No. Hebephrenic schizophrenia. Did we discuss any kind? You don't know what hebephrenic is, fine. Did we discuss any kind of other criterion? Hallucination, maybe, disorganized speech, negative effect? No, there was only one delusion, and it's also non-bizarre, right? So that is why delusional disorder. Okay, so I hope you understood whatever that was taught today, and I hope you go and revise it. I hope you made notes as well. So I'll see you in the next class. We'll discuss mood disorders in that one, continuing the module 2. So I hope to see you all soon. Bye bye. Take care. Have a good day.